And really welcome to our ongoing Spa Takeaway series. We're so delighted to have you join us. We think we're dead on time. There's been less technical issues, so happy days. I just wanted to, before we kick off with our guest today, I wanted to just talk a little bit about events that have happened overnight and the activity that we've been doing generally. Up on our website, we have loaded into our coronavirus area a summary of all of the government measures broken down by state and federal government, including agencies. So go online and check that out. It's screenproducers.org.au, and you can't help but see in the insights section the click through to all of that material, because that'll give you a good summary of what's happened. I think in the last 24 hours or a little bit before, we've had announcements from Screen Tasmania and Screen West, which have been really great, some really good positive momentum from those agencies. We're really keen to make sure all agencies are engaging and are seeing what programs they can announce to keep the industry going. And we're delighted we're going to be speaking to a number of those agency heads. On Friday it's Kylie Munich, tomorrow, as we go forward with all of their ideas and programs. The other thing that we did overnight was send through a submission to the government on the latest measures to do with the JobKeeper program. And I'll be talking to Sarah in a minute just about maybe some gaps there, about what we're seeing, what she's been noticing as well in the government's response. And look, more broadly, I wanted to give a shout out before we start to all of the trade media, to Don Groves, to David Tiley, to David Knox, all of those guys that are keeping everyone in the loop and feeding information around what's going on, sharing the work that they do. If there's anything I could implore you to do is to support our trade press. Give them a subscription, encourage them, share what they're doing, ensure that you're engaging with all of those people, because they're really a critical part of our industry, and I absolutely want to continue to support them any way we can, but I want to encourage everyone to be doing the same thing. Okay, so there's a lot of interest about this conversation, and not surprisingly, I'm really delighted to have you, Sarah Hanson-Young, with me today. I'm so excited because not only are you a great supporter of this industry, but you've also got so much to contribute in terms of your ideas and your thinking. I didn't want to miss the beat of just setting you up properly, because you have been engaging with the screen sector for a long time. I think 2 years ago now, although still waiting to see the results of all this work, we had a whole review that the Senate did that you chaired that led to a lot of positive reform recommendations, and somewhat ironically, we're about to be in the middle of a review that we were waiting to hear the government report on through ACMA and Screen Australia what it was going to be doing. So we've been a very good friend and close to the industry and all of the outcomes for the industry for a long time. So you start with a very good knowledge around this industry, but more broadly you have a role that is expanding across all the creative industries, and you've got the environment, and you've got tourism. So you couldn't help but think you've had a smash of a year, right? So do you want to just say hello first up, and what are you up to, and maybe just also set a parameter around what you're doing. And I should also, acknowledge that you're at your home. It looks great, but you're probably feeling very isolated from the people that you normally work with. Wow. So how are you coping with all of that?
Thanks, Matt, and it's lovely to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Yes, this is my little house here in the Adelaide Hills. I'm in official quarantine because I arrived in Adelaide on Sunday after Parliament had sat for that extraordinary session last week. And when you come now across the SA border, everyone has to be in quarantine for 14 days. But it's no different than, I guess, what everybody's being asked to do anyway, which is stay at home unless absolutely necessary. And I'm here with my 13-year-old daughter. So I must say the most difficult part of this is wearing those three hats all of the time throughout the day. The mum hat, the worker hat, and the teacher hat, because the homeschooling is, I know there's lots of parents out there trying to work out how they juggle this right now. So, yes, it's just me and Cora here.
How are you doing it? Are you just trying to interrupt your day bits and pieces, or have you got scheduled time? Because I know you closely in the sense of I know your work ethic, and it would be on a good day 24/7 anyway regarding your work. So how are you doing it actually? Have you got slotted times, or what are you doing?
It's I'm not sure.
Right.
I think each day's been a bit different so far. We're trying to get a bit of a routine going. The main thing is to try and get her studying in the morning, and then it kind of tapers off in the afternoon. So yeah, she's up in her room at the moment, working on something. So she's doing what she can. I think the schools are trying really hard to
accommodate,
accommodate, and one of the best things about this generation, my daughter's 13, and so already she knows how to use Google Hangout, and she's kind of quite au fait with Zoom and all of these things. She had yesterday, she had her laptop set up, and she was tapping away on some kind of chat program with the teacher.
Right.
Meanwhile, having on her phone Google Hangout set up with her friends as if they were all sitting in the classroom together.
Wow.
So, I think there's a bit of they're being creative too, which is good. I was a little bit nervous about having the phone in the room while she was doing schoolwork, and she put her foot down and said, "Well, Mum, I don't sit in a classroom on my own. So if I can have my friends on Google Hangout,
it makes it more bearable."
It makes it more bearable. So I conceded on that front, and I think she's probably right.
This is true for every person in the workforce, including all the creative industries that are juggling this same problem. I would sometimes, because people are touring and around and moving between productions and all of those things, I wonder if we're in some ways better set up for kind of those flexible arrangements, but I don't know. I mean, it would be an interesting conversation point. I wanted to, before we even go into the coronavirus, I was interested, well, maybe in regards to your daughter, because you've talked a bit in the past about when you've launched, I think, a Save Kids TV campaign, and you were always concerned, I think, about the impressions of what was happening in media and what was going on for children, and encouraging and indeed advocating very aggressively for the idea that we need a really robust space for children to engage with culturally and all of those things. Are you noticing anything different maybe about what's happening as we sort of are shutting down maybe and perhaps more communicating with each other on a domestic level? We're getting a sense of heightened interest in Australian content actually. So I don't know what you're seeing through her eyes and your own.
Look, I think, it's always got me that kids these days consume more content than ever before, right? They might not consume it in the same ways that we did. The after school hours, come down, sit in front of the television and kind of soak it up until dinner time or until you're told to go off and do your homework. But they are consuming it on their phones, on their tablets, on their smart TVs, in their bedrooms, and in the lounge rooms, we're in the car. There's so much content being consumed, and I've always been really worried as a mum about the level of quality of that content for kids. And I know there are so many Australian productions out there that have those values at their heart as well, wanting to make sure they deliver programs for kids that are
educative,
not just educative, but also just not just brain junk food. Some of the stuff, I must say, if I walk into the bedroom sometimes and I see some of the stuff that's streaming, and I'm just like, what is this shit? Like, it's I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on your live stream.
No, I don't think this is rated technically, but we
some of this is just absolute crap. A lot of it comes from overseas, whereas I think proper dedicated kids programming needs to be educational, it needs to be relatable, and it does have to have that Australian story focus so that kids can see their own lives being reflected back at them. And I reckon now that parents are and kids are kind of crammed into their house at the same time looking for things to do while we're all in isolation and stay at home mode, this is an opportunity for parents to really have a bit of a rethink about what their kids are consuming and making sure that it's a bit of a balance. I'm not saying that junk food viewing isn't okay in totality, it's about moderation and making sure that there is good quality stuff out there that's Australian made, Australian produced, that our kids can relate to, that their communities look like our communities.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that I'm quite passionate about.
And look, interestingly, David Anderson from the ABC was on, I think, Breakfast Show this morning talking about that absolute need, and he's seeing the educative layers that the ABC does needing to be used, and the people are now realising they're sort of starved and maybe observing the way their kids are consuming more because everyone's in such close proximity. And, it's interesting at the moment, the industry's been smashed apart in terms of all the productions, in terms of live action, a lot of live action productions for drama. Some of the documentary and factual is still okay at the moment, but interestingly, a lot of children's animation and types of programming that can be done at homes is still probably able to be done because of that ability rather to be working remotely. So it's an interesting moment where perhaps we can be actually delivering on some things for children. I notice how well, I think overnight, a bit of an update for everyone, overnight Bluey, I think, won the International Emmy for, I know, isn't that great? International Emmy
fantastic.
For Ludo Productions. And that's the sort of content that you realise people are starved of and really want something that can work for children, but also parents get a giggle out of as well. So,
well, it's important to make sure that it's appropriate for kids and it's engaging for kids. But if we're all going to be stuck with these shows running 24/7 for however many months this lockdown goes for, some shows that parents can tolerate and enjoy at the same time is probably really worthwhile.
And look, maybe the only thing to add to that is we're seeing at the moment, and I understand the strain on every part of the system, but and we've been public about this, the challenges that all broadcasters are probably having in different ways. But the thing that we don't want to see is the removal of any quotas at this point particularly. We understand that a pipeline might be damaged particularly, but we don't want to be doing anything like that. We want to, the point of our conversations we were having around the quotas with the government were that we were looking at maybe, an evolution of those quotas, not a devolution. And I think absolutely in this moment, in this time when you really want to be stimulating a lot of creative businesses to have a opportunity after this is all over to be able to fire up quickly, the last thing you want to do is, remove all those windows of commissioning to the system. And yes, there's lots of reform that we can, and you've thought about as well with this, but I know we're going into a deep dive on this, but I think it's useful to kind of reiterate sometimes.
Look, I think that's absolutely true. And, while the kids' TV aspect is really close to my heart and something that it was one of the main reasons I started engaging directly with the sector that you represent, it's because it's the pointy edge of the wedge, really. The rest of what flows from that is really important to the broader society as well. And so a reduction in the commissioning of local stories, Australian made, would be devastating, not just for industry and the people who work within the industry, but it would be devastating for us as a community, us as a society. And I think right now, when people are suffering, when there is a crisis, when the world has been turned upside down and is only surviving because of through goodwill and struggle, it is our arts community that helps us not just manage our way through, but actually helps us to heal and recover at the end. And so we need at this point confidence in the sector that people are able to know that they will have shows commissioned, projects commissioned, because someone's going to tell this Australian story at the end of this for ourselves, to be able to reflect upon it, to be able to think about how that changed us as a community. Australia will never be the same again. The world is never going to be the same again. Sure, some things will go back to the way they were, but this is an evolution. You can't shut down the economy, shut down the community, put everybody into their homes and say, okay, have your relationships over virtual means for the next however many months, and think that won't have a lasting impact on us as a society. Of course it will. from young people to, middle-aged people to older people. We're all having to adapt out of this. And at the end of it, how our artists and creatives reflect that back to us and help us unpack that, understand and heal is going to be so essential. So the last thing we want to see is that in this period when times are really tough for the creative industry, and I get the point about live action productions, obviously live performance as well.
Absolutely.
At this time has been absolutely smashed. The last thing we want is those people being kind of wiped from the existence of the work and the job and the commitment that they have to helping entertain and inform us, because not only are we using all their past work now to get through this process, and we should reflect on that and
good
gratitude to that, but we're going to need them desperately as we recover and we heal.
I want to pivot to the bigger challenges in a minute, but I also just was reflecting on this. I had a chat with Emil Sherman yesterday, and he was talking about how what's really fascinating is as people have in some ways more time on their own and maybe to think about what's important, we're seeing a kind of a re-healing of certain things, and maybe that's true of the environment, but also you can see on the internet people's creative spirits are starting to come out a bit, and across the whole of society, the type of things you're seeing in bonding and connecting and singing and being creative online. And it's a really heartening exercise in which you realise how perhaps our day-to-day world suffocates a bit of our creativity. I'm lucky I work in a creative industry. I'm not doing creative things every day, but I'm seeing that closely, and a lot of people don't see that closely. And I'm really kind of heartened by maybe it's an opportunity where people are going to really respond to that when they come out of this. This is actually more important than maybe what they were doing, day to day before this, right? I mean, that's the optimistic view.
Well, and look, I've always been a half glass full type of person. I think in politics it's really important to be able to be optimistic, because particularly as a progressive, it would be very
if you were doom and gloom
for very long if you weren't optimistic that the world could change and what you were contributing to is about making the world a better place. So look, I do come from a position of optimism on this, and that's not to say that there aren't people who are really suffering now and are going to keep suffering, and at the end of this are going to not have much left, and we can't be we can't forget that.
Yes, absolutely.
We actually have to make sure we put in place that safety net to look after those people. And we are all in all of this. We are in this all together, and we've got to be a bit kind to each other as we go through. But I think there are some positive elements, and the kind of unleashing of creativity is one thing that I just think has been amazing. Though that kind of virtual choir,
amazing,
the kind of trend that started,
the couch choir,
fantastic. The couch choir. There's all these great elements, but I also think the fact that we're all embracing technology to reconnect community. I've been somebody who has been quite critical of big tech over the last few years, and increasingly so, whether we're talking Facebook, Google, and kind of how they've they take people's artists' work and creatives' work for granted. And of course, I'm worried about the big streaming companies and the impact that they are starting to have on a lack of commitment, say, to local story making. But in the midst of this, what we're seeing is the community taking ownership over technology again. To use it to connect for themselves. As somebody who's, I've been on Twitter as a politician for a long time, I've seen the worst parts of Twitter and the kind of troll culture and the kind of keyboard warriors, which, big tech has kind of for a long time just ignored. All of a sudden, we're all having to use this same type of technology, and we are reshaping as a community what it means to us and how we want to use it. And we're using it positively. It's not,
Yes.
I think here is an opportunity to, regain people power
Yes.
in the online space and to overthrow troll culture. I'm quite excited about the possibility.
It sounds great. And look, one of the things I wanted to try to make sure we've had a chance to talk about is what you've seen. I think everyone's wanting to be supportive of the government at this moment in what is a particularly difficult time to get as many packages together and work on things with Australians. I'm interested in what you're seeing through the prism of your constituency, but particularly maybe the arts and creative industries in terms of what they've done so far and what's missing a beat around. I think we've seen the first wave was about supporting a sort of small exercise in a payroll tax up to 50 grand and then a relief, and then a second exercise was that job and increasing the dole to job seekers effectively, and then now we're seeing the JobKeeper program. But there are some challenges in the JobKeeper program. We've spoken a bit about that. Do you want to touch on what you observed on that program?
Look, I mean, obviously there's a number of big packages that have come through. I think the doubling of the New Start and the job seeker rate is a really important win, and people have been fighting for that for a long time. And I know a lot of creatives have been in and off of Centrelink over the years, between gigs, between projects. So the idea, and we know that was set at such a ridiculously low level, below the poverty line for far too long. It's over 25 years or something now that it hasn't actually kept up with the rate that it should be. So about bloody time it was doubled, frankly. It's frustrating it took a crisis to get there, but it's good that it has. The other package, of course, the $130 billion, which is the wages subsidy or the wages guarantee, which has kind of taken some of those elements from what Boris Johnson has done in the UK and what Jacinda Ardern has done in New Zealand. What we are seeing, and I'm getting people emailing and contacting my office about this, is the impact this is going to have particularly on people who are employed on kind of casual contracts.
Yes.
Because you have to have been employed with that business on the 1st of March for 12 months.
Yes.
For that business to access it and for the individual to get the guaranteed wage subsidy. That really misses the point and skips the beat of what is how the creative sector operate, also how the tourism sector operate. And both these industries interlink, and I'm responsible for both of them for the Greens, and they both interlink a lot. Festivals, festival seasons, shows, kind of production periods, and then, when you're off doing your kind of your film festivals and your pitching, you're working through different organisations as creatives. And so the idea that you would be with the same person for 12 months or the same business under the same business banner for 12 months prior to March 1 is just unrealistic. It may be, in fact, that you've been with this business banner, under this business's banner for 12 years on and off. So you've got an existing dedicated relationship, but
just been back and forth.
It's project to project and season to season.
Yes, exactly.
So it's just we've got to get this fixed.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we're seeing is that the many people in this community and industry, and indeed other industries, are project by project, and that doesn't then take into account whether or not they were employed at the 1st of March or whether or not they were having what sort of the time of their lives or not a particularly good time in the time period 1 year back. So there has to be a greater flexibility given to, I think, certain industries that have really, or the scheme overall, ideally, in order to kind of accommodate that, because I think there's a big difference between, and I think psychologically, but also in the hip pocket sense between those two, JobKeeper versus job seeker levels. And I think that most people will want to use and have their workforce ready to go as soon as they can. Certainly in the production industry, that's really the biggest stress that we've got. And I think one of the things we're trying to work to as well is overall measures that can help the screen industry specifically in our instance, but I know that's also applying to other creative industries that can help people to get back on track quickly. And I think that's probably true. We're in a pipeline of productions that take sometimes up to 5 years to carefully build the financing and insurances, and all of those things are going to need some oversight and flexibility from government. We're at the moment, for those that are interested, are collecting together all these ideas and giving them to government as we go. But I think we'll, of course, be keen to have you participate in the advocacy associated with that, because I think you've got a good handle on the broader set of industries that are going to be affected in the same way in terms of how you get the economy back up off its knees in the future.
And it's about being able to do some of that work now, so that there is a rebuilding of confidence in the community once we stop the spread of this virus. Now, the Prime Minister talks about the deep freeze of the economy and then the thawing out of the economy. Well, while we're in deep freeze, if you like to use that term, a lot of this creative commitment and work and dedication needs to be being done, because the only way we are going to get through this at the end is with positivity and a recommitment and to social cohesion, and that comes from the arts and creative sector more than anywhere else, I believe.
Thank you. And look, I wanted to make sure, we've had a couple of questions come through, and I completely forgot to ask them yesterday, but I wanted to make sure I've asked them. I'll read them out because some of them are a bit long. One of them is, with Parliament just being announced to return next week, and since you're stuck in quarantine, how is the democratic process and the checks and balances going to be allowed to return so that the government can be brought to account in different ways? So how is that going to be, and the questioner is asking particularly because there's a problem with how do they bring brought into account with the type of issues we're talking about with, unsecure workforce and the issues that are going on. So how is it going to work at the moment with Parliament?
Look, we're still waiting to be able to negotiate probably with the government about how all of this will happen. Right. We're not sure how many people will go back. It will be a pared back Parliament on Wednesday. We're pushing for Parliament to be able to sit in some form, whether that's virtually or some other form, more often, because we are very worried that that democracy is at risk here. We're in the middle of a economic crisis, a health crisis. The last thing we need is launching ourselves into a democratic crisis as well. Accountability is really important right now. Transparency is really important right now. And I know we've been talking about the kind of, screen industry in terms of entertainment and creativity. But the other side of what I do in this space is looking at the impact of journalism and kind of public interest journalism. That's in a crisis spot right now too. So if you have no Parliament, if you've got less journalists being able to do their job, less transparency and accountability, we are heading down a very dangerous path when it comes to the democratic right of the community to know what their government's up to and to know what's going on. So we're very passionate about that, and we're going to do everything we can to keep shining the spotlight.
I think I'm tempted to leave it almost at that point, unless there's anything you'd like to add in, only because it's a great way to sort of summarise perhaps the critical nature of what I think politicians are needing to do in this space. And it's not without supporting the government in moments of crisis in many ways, but indeed I always find that it's that sort of triangulation of ideas that the Greens and the opposition and other parties offer. In its worst way, it's seen as bickering and aggressive behaviour, but really it's about also providing a bit of a different perspective to what's going on, so that we're capturing and nothing gets left out, and we're capturing what's going on. And I should add, we will have, I think, Tony Burke on this exercise in a couple of weeks. We've reached out to the Minister. We're hoping he will be a part of this, but we'd also like to keep the conversation going, because I think this is going to be an ongoing conversation about what is the government doing, where can it be, where can it do more, and how can we help to encourage that to happen in different ways. Any kind of final remarks or thoughts?
Well, Matt, I think you've summed it up really well. we know that we're all in this together, but we need to make sure no one is left behind. And I know for a lot of the people who would be tuning into this, a lot of people in the creative and art screen sector, it's a really unnerving, uncertain time. Please know that those of us at home, politicians or not, mums or dads or not, we value good quality Australian content and Australian made stories. We're relying on it to get us through this process, and we need it afterwards. So look, I'm going to be working really hard to make sure we keep all the tools in the toolbox to help you. And if there is anything in particular that is a problem that needs to be raised, that you think I'm missing, to anybody out there watching, please get in contact. Facebook, Instagram, through email. My office, even though we're virtual, we're still operating. We're happy to do what we can to help you.
Thank you, Sarah. That's said with absolute heart, and I appreciate your time today. Thank you very much for being with us. Tomorrow it's Kylie Munich, always up for new ideas, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. All good?